Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Lucen, and I am helping schoolculturesolutions.com launch their brand. So today we have the founder of School Culture Solutions. He goes by the name of Mr. V, and I would like him to introduce himself. So, Mr. V, what is School Culture Solutions? And just tell us all about it.
Yeah, I'm Hemant Venkataraman, also known as Mr. V. Spent the vast majority of my career as a classroom instructor, as a school administrator and founder here in Brooklyn, and recently launched School Culture Solutions, which, as the name suggests, is about helping school leaders, teachers, faculty members develop really powerful, positive, empowering school cultures, specifically with an emphasis on restorative justice, restorative practices, being trauma-informed settings, and really just helping students in a comprehensive, kind of holistic way.
Wow. So what I got out of that is restorative practices, restorative justice. This is definitely a term that I've heard, but for those who don't know what is restorative practices?
Yeah, restorative practices in a nutshell is this. It really comes from a science. There's extensive research, but kind of came in from the criminal justice system, and the key elements were imported into the educational system, right? And it's really about building community. So the kind of the two key ingredients of restorative practices are about building really strong communities where people want to be their best for each other, support each other, and help the entire community be its best. And then teaching folks that conflict is inevitable, but there are healthy ways to repair harm, right? And we're going to kind of focus on restoring relationships and repairing harm when it's done, and when anything harms kind of the principles that our community abides by. And this has proven something that's obviously helpful in our criminal justice system, but really essential to helping schools thrive. And a lot of schools are doing great things with it these days.
Nice. So why is it that you find this type of work important, or why is it that you decided to create this company, this organization?
Yeah, I mean, so many reasons. I think I started my career as a math teacher in the New York City Teaching Fellows, nearly 2 decades ago, and worked in some of the so-called toughest schools. New York City, high suspension rates, metal detectors, violence, security everywhere, and so the term school culture, when I think about those settings, it didn't feel particularly positive. And that's not to say there weren't great moments of positivity and amazing educators doing wonderful things with amazing children. But I think back to my experience throughout my educational career, and I realized that only recently in the last several years did I start to see that rather than focusing on, as long as our punishments are strict enough and we have enough clear, transparent rules, and we threaten students and warn them and show them that, the hammer will come down swiftly, that's when things will work well. If we actually focus on building community, and showing children with diverse needs, hey, this is a place where you belong, where people care about you, it's so much more successful that way, right? That students want to be their best and contribute, and you're less likely to bring harm to a community when you really feel like it accepts you and it is your own. So I think back to earlier parts of my career, and then more recently when I saw just the true power of building community, making an entire school and just the whole disciplinary policy, the baseline, the foundation being about relationships. Everything in that school is about relationships among adults, among students, between students and adults. And then teaching folks, I've had some really amazing, powerful experiences with helping people repair relationships and restore harm. So seeing how really successful that was in empowering an entire community and allowing students to be their best academically and otherwise, got me really passionate about restorative practices and supporting schools and building better and more positive school cultures.
Oh, wow. So did I get that right? You said you founded, or you were part of, a charter school, and can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so in 2013, I co-founded with a former colleague, Unity Prep Charter School, which currently has a middle school campus in Bed-Stuy and a high school campus in Williamsburg, both in Brooklyn. The school's in its 7th year now. Although I made a tough decision to kind of step away and really focus on bringing restorative practices to the mainstream. I'm still very close to the school and excited that the first ever little miniature 6th graders that ever joined the school are going to be graduating high school this spring. A large percentage of them had already been accepted to college months ago. So it's a really exciting time for that school.
That's amazing. Yeah. So then you said you made a hard decision to go ahead and leave it. And I'm assuming School Culture Solutions is your next big thing. So with School Culture Solutions, what do you offer? Like what are the services? How does that look like?
Yeah. So and it's kind of shaping up as I go along and have conversations with educators and just other community organizations and leaders, right? So my first thought was at this charter school that we co-founded, I was able to, charter schools are meant to be breeding grounds for innovation, right? That's what that whole movement was about. And so we were able to innovate and find a balance. Like, what's our identity? What's our disciplinary policy? There are all these different acronyms out there: PBIS, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, and RTI, and all these different things. And so who are we going to be? And we found a balance, I believe. And we had a restorative school culture, one that really was about building community. And so 80% of our restorative practices really being about proactive measures to build relationships and make people feel like they had somebody that they were close to, that had their back, that was listening to them, right? Students, teachers, and everybody. And then the 20% kind of responsive. What are we going to do when things do go wrong, or when there are misbehaviors or harm is done? And so having seen the power of that, my first thought with School Cultural Solutions was, I have kind of a model now that works. A lot of kind of unique things that I've developed, along with my training from the IRP, the International Institute for Restorative Practices, and have some unique approaches. I have some on-the-ground experience that not that many people have now, for years on end, incorporating in New York City schools. So I want to create something that is, I can just really teach and deploy in schools and say, hey, I can hand this to you, give you some ongoing support. And now schools, you can, over a period of a few years, really transform into a restorative setting. And you're going to see how incredible the impact is, right? And then more recently, I've started to be approached by community organizations as well, nonprofits, after-school programs, yoga program. I mean, different kind of activities that are saying, hey, maybe you can just do an introductory workshop and just teach our staff members how to run circles, which is a community building process with our students. And so even though we're not a school, we would love for our students to feel like they have a voice. We want our staff and students to have closer relationships. We want everyone here to feel like they can be open, that they trust each other, that they're more confident. So can you do a circles workshop to achieve that? And of course, most certainly. So that's another direction that School Culture Solutions is going in. And frankly, I'm dreaming big. I mean, long term, one of the reasons I left a school I loved and helped begin in order to launch School Culture Solutions was that I still wasn't that satisfied with just the overall landscape of the politics and the decision makers, policy makers, and what they're focusing on these days, right? It's still very standardized, test centric. Again, a lot of great support we received from Albany and from the state authorizers when we launched a charter school. But honestly, when it came time to decide, are we going to extend your charter? Because you only get 5 years at a time. And they say, are you up to snuff? Are you a great option for students in your district? They basically only looked at our standardized test scores, right? And yeah, of course, those are important. You've got to look at academic achievement. But down the hall, there were some incredible restorative practices, community conferences going on, some amazing instances of healing from some pretty serious things and traumatic events that had affected both students and families and teachers. And we were doing some rather groundbreaking things, in our building. And the policymakers actually expressed no interest in that, right? And that was kind of disheartening for me, because I know that those things are at least as impactful. Personally, I think they're even more impactful than the standardized test prep overall in our students' just life success and contentment. So that started to get me thinking, I want to impact policy in the long term, right? Folks who are looking, whether here in New York or around the country or nationally, at what makes a school successful, what makes a child successful and just happy and fulfilled in the long term. If they're not looking at these other soft skills, if they're not looking at a school's ability to foster relationships, if they're not asking students, do you feel supported here? And they're just looking at the hard numbers, I think they're missing something. And I want to move that needle in the long run. So that's really where I want School Culture Solutions to go. But I think right in the short term, the main service that I have to offer is, hey, principal, AP, teacher, you're experiencing perhaps not the most positive school culture here. You are disheartened by the number of incidents or violent incidents or just the number of suspensions, expulsions that your school has had to use, and you're looking for something that's better. Yes, I can help you with that and guide you and do some trainings for your full staff and then key leadership and guide you, as long as you want. Do you want me to do a one-off thing? I can. My preference is to really work with you over a period of 1, 2, or even up to 5 years and really give you that guidance.
Wow, fantastic, man. I mean, I remember when you first told me about this whole idea, I was really attracted to the fact that you are really trying to bring the community back together, especially in these locations where it just seems very crumbled, very, very in the ruins. So that's definitely one of the reasons why I connect with your brand, is because you put community first. Community is definitely one of the values that I have in the people that I work with and the things that I put out there. So I'm going to throw a little curveball at you. Right now, we're in the middle of COVID-19, right? And education just got put on a pause, on a freeze. Would School Culture Solutions have some sort of voice in all this? Would you help educators get through this? Is that the right match for it, or am I just is that completely wrong?
Yeah, well, there's two big ideas on my mind right now, right? So one, support during this once first of its kind crisis, and then support when we all return to buildings, which is looking pretty likely that it's not going to be till the fall semester starts again in August, September, right? And here we are in April. So during, I've already begun some outreach with, and not just educators, but with friends and family. Let's make sure we're taking every effort possible to maintain our mental health and well-being, right? There are tons of resources out there, and I know families are feeling overwhelmed. In fact, a nonprofit that you and I are, both involved in is aiming to support parents who are feeling overwhelmed with, like, I don't know how to homeschool my kids, but there are a lot of resources there, right? So I'm glad those are in place, and folks like you and me are going to help get them into the hands of families who need them. But a lot of people are feeling that anxiety, right? And that's another kind of, sometimes people don't realize that restorative practices overlaps with helping with stress, traumatic stress, anxiety. Mindfulness is a very popular word nowadays. But we use the analogy a lot, like the flight attendants always tell you, if by chance our plane's going down, make sure you grab the vent and support yourself first before your kids and your family members. If you don't take care of yourself, if our well-being isn't maintained, we can't be there for children and for the people who need us most, right? And unfortunately, but kind of comically for us educators, the world is starting to see how stressful our jobs are, just trying to guide their kids all day. And so we need to offer tools to educators and everyone else of, like, here are some things you can do. Here are some practices you can do to uplift your mood and spirits, whether it's expressing gratitude, working on your social connection. Here are meditations you can do. Here are even breathing practices that physically are dismissing, molecules of stress and stress hormones like cortisol from your body. Here's just encouragement and places you can look for support. So that is kind of one of the things that I sort of specialize in schools and even in this period, and I'm looking to support educators with that, right? But when we all get back what do we do, right? I mean, and this is something I work with schools on. So sometimes my workshops with schools, look, I'll speak from personal experience. Something traumatic that might kind of send shockwaves throughout a whole community might happen. Students at my school went on a field trip to Washington, D.C., and were sort of verbally assaulted, accosted, and racially harassed in a way that really traumatized them, right? So now they come back from this out-of-state trip. You can't just go back to class on Monday like nothing happened, right? So this has sent ripples through your community, and people are experiencing pain and many other feelings that they need to get out. So you've got to bring the community together and heal and respond before you can get back into an optimal learning setting. Well, the same thing is going to be true now, right? If schools are about community and relationships, those have been severed now. And kudos to every teacher that's doing video chats, that's calling kids, that's doing these one-on-one. I mean, everything in their power. I've seen schools, all the teachers held up messages, like they made signs. They're doing things for kids' birthdays. So, teachers know the importance of relationship. They're doing their best, but we're not with the kids, right? There's a kid who just needs to come in and needs a pat on the back or a hug. We know the stuff that our kids go through. So they're going to need to build community in ways that they've never before. That like one day orientation, get to know you icebreaker, not going to cut it in the fall of 2020. So I hope to strategize with as many schools as possible, dozens of schools, if at all possible, and set them up, maybe over the summer, if we can get back up and running with their staffs, to hit the ground running and say, here's how you're going to do this via circles and other mechanisms. Here's how you're going to welcome kids back in a way you may never have before in your career, and show them like, hey, this is your home. Never forget that. This school is your home. And, we've got some ground to make up, but, this is a place where relationships matter more than anything. And we're going to make sure that's clear, even if it takes us a week or two before we get into fractions and the Civil War and all that other good stuff, right?
Wow, man. It sounds like the service that you can provide with School Culture Solutions is completely in match with what's going on right now. It seems like you can offer a lot of help to a lot of educators. Yeah. That's amazing, man. Wow. I didn't realize it was that powerful. So I think what would you be willing, put you on the spot right here, would you be willing to jump on maybe like a webinar, and do like a group circle, or kind of like introduce this to some educators, kind of get them going, and then actually do it in person once we're in the summer, fall. How does that sound?
That would be fun. I mean, it could be a little choppy, right? Let's see how it goes. I've never done a virtual circle before, because so much of my own training is about even just the physical presence and the space we create, one of unity and equality and, all those things. There are no physical obstructions. Like I don't even allow someone to put a table in between, you know what I mean? But it's needed right now, right? So yeah, I think it's a cool idea. Maybe we'll get a bunch of educators on a video conference like this and model how you might facilitate a circle with kids, but also for ourselves, right? Hey, how are you feeling right now as a teacher who can't see your students? I mean, you do this because you love it, right? And so that would be really cool. Yeah, I'd be down to do that.
Nice, man. Nice. So, wow. So you have an amazing vision for School Culture Solutions. The services that you offer are for educators, for assistant principals, for principals, pretty much shifting the way the culture of a school is right now, right? It's like not being so hard on the numbers, but more on the, I don't like to use the term soft skills or like the other stuff, but, just not the hard numbers, right? And I think that's incredibly important, just for anybody's well-being.
I'm sorry, yeah, another way to express it is I say to teachers, because sometimes there's pushback, right? I heard restorative practices means like give kids a slap on the wrist and don't really have consequences, and our place is going to be overrun by misbehavior and unruly behavior. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is everybody can probably think back to their favorite teacher, right? Like, I don't know, Steve, K to 12 or even college, does something come to mind, a teacher, professor? Like, who's your favorite teacher that you had?
Oh man, I definitely Mr. Drogan. He was my art teacher back in 6th or 7th grade, something like that, middle school.
And how'd you feel in Mr. Drogan's class?
Bro, he's the one that kind of put me on to art. you know, and me, I'm a designer, I'm a creative, you know, and
Right.
it was very warm, welcoming, it was fun. He was comical at times, you know, and but still stern, but comical. I don't know what it was, but he had such a great vibe, you know, whenever you came into that classroom, and you know it wasn't also super hard and serious, but you get to get your creative juices flowing, and he facilitated that. You know,
Yeah.
that made
You
me
know,
feel good. Made me
I
feel
heard you
good.
say welcoming. It sounds like, I mean, you're a professional creative and artist today. So perhaps that started your inspiration in that direction. And it's interesting that you said stern, right? Because that's something I teach in our workshops. Restorative practices doesn't mean loosey goosey. In fact,
Mhm.
your students may walk away saying, wow, that was the most kind of stern or strict teacher I ever had. But what that means is they were about business and getting things done, but super loving, welcoming, heard all voices, made this place a place where we could take risks, explore, and all of that, right? And so I have those conversations with educators, and then it's like, hey, shouldn't everyone in your room feel the way you felt in that space? What was your favorite learning experience ever, right? Um, and imagine how much more they're going to learn in that way than they will if it's just like, well, we don't have time for that. I just got to get to the syllabus and finish today's aim and tomorrow's. Um, and teachers usually understand that, right? When you remind a teacher of their most incredible learning experience, it could have been a coach on a running team, a violin teacher, anything. But they're like, yeah, you're right. I want to make everyone in my space feel the way I felt there. And honestly, restorative practices is the key to that. So that's kind of what we're about.
Beautiful. I don't see why any one educator would not do something with school culture solutions. That's fantastic. Who I truly believe if one is in education, it's for they really believe in the betterment of their community, their students, their kids, you know,
Yeah,
families.
and you know,
So
one thing, Steve, that even just to actually frankly answer your point is there is some fatigue in our industry, right? It almost feels like every year some organization, company, or the DOE says, hey, like, here's the latest thing. We paid a lot of money for this, so your school needs to use XYZ this year. It's the new XYZ system of culture. And principal is like, oh my God, okay, so you're going to hand me this thing, send some trainers, and then next year you're going to hand me another thing, right? So I'm actually glad you brought that up, just because if anyone were to kind of listen to this conversation, you know, what I mentioned to school leaders is this isn't the next kind of out of the box thing. Actually, what we're doing is tapping into how human beings have built relationships and like resolved conflict for thousands of years, right? We're going back to the old school, actually. It's not the newest fad. It's saying that people feel most comfortable and they're most productive when these relationships exist, you know, when they feel that love and support, when they also know that they're being held to standards and that there are expectations on them, right? And so that's what we're going to offer to your school, you know?
fantastic, man. I love it. I love it. I love it. So where can people find you? How do they get more information? Give us the lowdown on that.
Yeah, well, schoolculturesolutions.com is the website, you know, and my contact info is there. Folks can book a 30-minute intro call. And, you know, my contact info is there, Mr. V at schoolculturesolutions.com. And, you know, one thing I encourage schools in particular to take advantage of is I do offer a free school walkthrough and needs assessment. And so that's not relevant until we get back into school buildings. But you know, I want to show school leaders and faculty members that this is something authentic. I'm not just going to have a phone conversation with you and say, yeah, sure, pay me and I'll come do this workshop. I'd love to come experience a few hours in your building. What does it look like as students are arriving? What are teachers, students, adults, everyone doing? Pop into a few classes, talk to folks involved in the social workers, the school counselors, folks involved in mental health, school discipline, the deans. Hear what folks are perceiving and think are the needs, see what's happening in common spaces like hallways, cafeteria, and then come together with key personnel and say, hey, here's what I observed. Also, here's what I heard from your own constituents, students and otherwise, about what they perceive the needs to be. And so now I can be more meaningful in saying, you know, I do have various workshops and things on my website, but I believe I can customize something for your school and help meet your needs, right? It might be an introduction to circles workshop, but it might just be that you need your discipline team needs more support in using behavioral data in a much more precise and exact way, and support with the technology there to analyze what's happening and then support students, right? So I do encourage professionals to reach out to me for a walkthrough so we can connect and have a much more meaningful starting point.
Amazing, amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I think that's it. That's a good introduction to School Culture Solutions. Mr. V, everybody, as he mentioned before, schoolculturesolutions.com. Mr. V at schoolculturesolutions.com for his email, but you can always just go on the website. And I guess we will see you guys very soon, hopefully on your blog, right, Mr. V?
Yes, sir. Yes, launching soon.
Launching soon. All right, guys. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.